Welcome to our Croner Taxwise webinar programme. If you've got any questions at all, make sure you call the tax or the VAT advice line. If you're not a client, give us a call on the number on the screen.
Hello, my name is Pat Now and I'm here today on behalf of Croner Taxwise. The topic that I'm going to be considering is in connection with ensuring we get entrepreneurs relief. We've had a couple of recent cases in respect of entrepreneurs relief. That aspect is nothing new. It does appear to be an area where HMRC seem to be actively pursuing cases to ensure that entrepreneurs relief is only claimed when all of the conditions apply. Now, one of the conditions for entrepreneurs relief in relation to shares is that, of course, we have to have 5% of the ordinary share capital. This is also, of course, a requirement that we have 5% of the votes, but they are both of them have to be present, but they are technically different parts of the definition. So 5% of ordinary share capital, what therefore is ordinary share capital? Well, I think many of us have just taken this as a given for a long time, but this year we've had two cases which have really been about whether somebody qualified for entrepreneurs relief on the basis of the level of ordinary shares that they held and whether in fact they had that sufficient 5% level. Let me just give you the definition of ordinary share capital first of all in relation to that we would use in respect of the entrepreneurs relief rules. Share capital is any share capital, however described, except a share with a fixed rate of dividend entitlement and no other entitlement to a share in company profits. So that's the definition, which maybe means that it applies to shares other than your bog standard shares with the title ordinary shares. The first of the cases, Castledine, there was a shareholder who had 5% of the ordinary shares. They were A ordinary shares. The company also had B ordinary shares, deferred shares and preference shares. Now, the way in which the deferred shares arose was that when individuals with B ordinary shares left the company, they would to remove that shareholder from holding those shares, they would be given deferred shares which would then be put into an employee benefit trust. Now, these deferred shares had no right to a dividend and also no voting power. And obviously the no voting power would have been a critical element in terms of somebody who'd left the company. They wouldn't want them to, of course, be able to continue to vote in the company. And this case didn't seem, in terms of its process, to raise any controversial issues. Looking at the definition of ordinary share capital and knowing that the deferred shares had no right to a dividend, therefore that is, they do not have a share to a fixed rate dividend, would seem to mean that they are included as ordinary share capital. The problem is that as a result of including the deferred shares as ordinary share capital, Mr. Castledine actually ended up only having 4.99% of the ordinary shares rather than 5%. And therefore entrepreneurs relief was denied to him. Now, that was obviously, it seemed to be quite, I suppose, unfair in some ways to him, but applying the letter of the law seemed to be the right decision in accordance with the law. And then much later, towards the end of 2016, as we are now, we've had a more recent case which has really got people talking about this issue again, the McQuillan case. Now, let me just give you some facts of the McQuillan case, first of all. There was 100 £1 ordinary shares in issue. Couple number one, that would have been Mr. and Mrs. McQuillan, owned 66%, so 33 each. There was another couple who owned the other 34% of the shares, 17 each. And the second couple also loaned the company £30,000. So the company started back in 2004, and then about 2006 they had an opportunity to obtain a government grant. And part of the condition of obtaining that grant was that the loan had to be converted into equity. The concern of the authority paying the grant was that the loan might be used, the grants might be used to repay the loan, rather than for the purpose for which they were making that grant. And so the £30,000 loan became 30,000 redeemable preference shares, with to be redeemed at par, with no votes attached to them, and no specific entitlement to a dividend. Shortly before the company was sold, the shares were redeemed. Company was sold. Couple number one claimed its entrepreneurs' relief, and the revenue said, well, no, because you don't own 5% of the ordinary share capital. Your 33% in the ordinary shares as a percentage of the ordinary share capital overall is only 0.001%. And so again, this business about what it says in the law was looked at, and but on this occasion the tribunal found for the taxpayers. Their rationale seems a little bit surprising. It was almost as though they were sympathetic to the taxpayers' lot, that they'd fallen into this bear trap, and wanted to find in favour of them. And so they used the fact that in HMRC guidance, it does actually say, or HMRC say, there is an argument to say that shares with a no right to a dividend have a fixed rate at 0%. So the question really is, does the phrase no right to a dividend, could that be equal to a 0 rate dividend? Well, to me, they seem to be saying something quite different. But that is the basis upon which that decision was made. I think there is certainly a lot of thought out there that this case decision is not a strong one in law. HMRC certainly have appealed the case, and I wouldn't want to wait upon the outcome of that case, which, if I was a betting person, would guess would go in HMRC's favour. I think what we've got to do on a practical note is to look at the share capital base of our OMB companies, and where we are using other than bog standard ordinary voting shares, where we're using deferred shares or preference shares, or shares where we've set up certain rights and not other rights, that we do look at whether those shareholders who are expecting to be able to benefit from entrepreneurs' relief will actually qualify on the basis that they have 5% of the ordinary share capital. Better to be safe than sorry.